The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute as soon as we get our slides up and going. Thanks for joining us on this lovely Friday afternoon. If the weather is nice in your part of the state, hope it is. All right, it looks like we're ready to roll, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Reyes. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an education equity specialist with the Oregon Department of Education, and you have all joined us this afternoon for this webinar following the Supreme Court decision around DACA. Folks have been paying attention to the news. You know, the Supreme Court made their decision just yesterday morning. So, a lot of the information we have to present to you today is new, emerging, hot off the press. We had been planning this for a while, knowing that the decision could go either way. We were really prepared for both potential outcomes, and happy to report that we've got the outcome that our communities really hope for and needed. And so we've invited some great community partners today to share, what's happening, who's involved. What are some next steps so we can get involved? Again, this webinar this afternoon is hosted by Oregon Department of Education in partnership with Causa Oregon and Home is Here Coalition. Next slide, please. So first, I'll open it to Colt Gill, Director of ODE, to give a message on behalf of the department. And then I'll turn it over to our friends from Causa and the Home is Here Coalition to introduce themselves. At the end, we'll share some resources that ODE is putting together for our educator community across the state as a follow-up, and then we'll open it up to question and answer at the end. Colt, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate the time here this afternoon. And I will just do a very short introduction, partly to say thank you to the ODE team for putting this together and all the work that Beth and Danisha, when she was with us prior to heading to Clackamas CSD, did on all of our documented, undocumented work, and we'll be sharing some of that here today. So appreciation for them and Causa Oregon and Here is Home for coming together to share this information with you all and try to answer some questions on a Friday afternoon. So I appreciate those folks that are joining us today. And I do want to say that the Supreme Court action, we're all very excited about it. It brought some relief, but we know it's far from a permanent solution for our students, our families, and our educators. So we really want to be sure that everybody's getting this information and has access to it. We have more than 11,000 hardworking DACA recipients here in Oregon. And as we move forward, the department is reaffirming our commitment to protect the rights of our dreamers. We also commit to working side by side with our school districts to ensure that our classrooms and schools are safe, inclusive, and welcoming, and respectful for all the educators, all the students, and their families, regardless of race, ethnicity, national origin, immigration status, or documentation status. So with that, I'm glad you are here with us again so that we can dig into some additional ways to support our dreamers this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'll pass it back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Colt. And I'm just going to leave it to our friends over at Causa and the Home is Here Coalition to introduce themselves and lead our presentation. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. So hello, everyone. My name is Fatima Preciado. My pronouns are she, her, or ella, and I'm a community organizer with Causa Oregon. I'm also a DACA recipient, and I've had DACA for 5 years. And I'm here today with Cindy. She's a community organizer, and Dr. Luz. She is the director for PCC, and they'll be joining me in my presentation. So for the first slide, we have an overview of what the Home is Here Oregon Coalition is. So the purpose of Home is Here Oregon is to respond and coordinate around a SCOTUS decision on DACA The Home is Here Oregon Coalition is led by directly impacted individuals and supported by community organizations, educators, legal service providers, labor unions, and members of Congress and other groups united to protect and empower our undocumented, DACAmented, and TPS community. And here on the next slide, you'll see some of our community organizations and groups who have been meeting consistently. Home is Here Oregon is led by an executive team made up of Oregon DACA Coalition, Adelantes Mujeres, Viva Inclusive Migrant Network, Luz, Raíces, the Dreamers Resource Center at PCC Rock Creek, and more. And if we look at the next slide, here are some of our goals for the campaign. So one is to spotlight what's at stake for over 700,000 DACA recipients. Number two, expand and strengthen community educational and wellness efforts with student leaders, community organizations, and allies in support of Dreamers, TPS holders, and the immigrant community. Number three, address a potential negative Supreme Court decision on the Dreamers, TPS holders, and the immigrant community. Moving on here, you'll see our work groups for the campaign. So this is just a visual representation that explain what the campaign consists of. So as you can see here, we prioritize a wellness and emotional team, a legal team, an educational team, labor and employment, and communications and narrative. And we also have an organizing coalition that makes sure that all of the goals of the campaign are being executed properly. Okay, and so now we're going to talk about Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, known as DACA. So since 2012, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program has allowed young undocumented immigrants in Oregon across the country an opportunity to go to school, serve in the military, support their families, and contribute to their workplaces without the immediate fear of being torn from their communities and sent away from the place they call home. So the hope and promise was that DACA would provide immigrant families with some level of stability while Congress developed a long-term legislative solution that created a path to citizenship for immigrants who have made the United States their home. However, when President Trump announced their intentions to end DACA on September 5th, 2017, he broke that promise. Since that day, we have been waiting anxiously to learn about what the future holds for DACA recipients and their families, as well as those with temporary protected status. So here you can see what a worker authorization card looks like. This is an example of that. So you're able to look over the facts on what is DACA. I won't read them word by word, but that's just for your own information. Okay, and now I want to talk about what DACA is not. So DACA is not a pathway to citizenship. DACA is only a temporary fix. Advocates argue that this temporary fix is not enough. DACA was not meant to be a permanent policy, and DACA does not provide a path to permanent residency. Okay. And now I'll turn it over to Cindy so she can talk about the DACA status decision.
Thank you, Fatima. My name is Cindy Avila. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and ella. And I'm a community organizer, but also an educator at the Hillsborough School District. And as we all know, we had an amazing victory yesterday. It was the best case scenario out of the 3 case scenarios that our coalition and our legal experts crafted. And so SCOTUS ruled that DACA is lawful and that the administration did not provide sufficient reason to terminate it. And so what this means is that DACA is reinstated and possibly new applications can be accepted again. The Trump administration still has the authority to repeal it and most likely will, but they will have to be more careful and have more tangible evidence to do so. So what this means is there's still a lot of information that we're waiting from USCIS to release process information for new applications, and if any additional program opportunities such as advanced parole or new applications, the process of that will also follow. So we will definitely have more information as we hear those announcements. But we are telling our community to continue to renew as much as we can. We do have a lot of legal clinics on behalf of our community partners that we're so helping to support our community members to do so. Next slide, please. So just some facts on DACA. We all know that our DACistas are, foundational to our economy, but also our community. It is estimated that nearly 2 million DACistas have contributed to Social Security annually. Nearly 470 million have paid into Medicare by Dreamers every year, and up to 1 trillion added to the U.S. GDP over a decade in permanent protections for Dreamers. 96% of Dreamers are either working or going to school. A lot of the cases doing both. And 60% of Dreamers have purchased a vehicle. 14% of Dreamers have purchased their own home, and they pay an estimated $380 million in property taxes every year. Next slide, please. So what's at stake? We know that even during this very critical time of COVID-19, we're relying on our essential workers, and a lot of our essential workforce are undocumented, are DACistas. And so here are some facts and figures that really highlight the contributions that DACistas make to our Oregon economy, and also nationwide. 43,500 healthcare. There are 43,500 healthcare workers. There's also 21,100 that operate in transportation and warehouse. 32,800 are employed in the retail trade, as well as 14,500 work in the manufacturing sector, and 13,300 work in support and waste management services. So if anything were to happen to this program, we know that it would be devastating to all of us during this very critical time. Next slide, please. And so I'll go ahead and pass it over to Fatima to talk a little bit about our elected members and their support.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, so as you can see here, like Cindy just talked about, there's still a lot at stake. So we've been sharing these same facts on DACA and what's at stake for our DACistas here in Oregon with our members of Congress. So we've been holding them accountable, and these are a few that we've already spoken with. So here you can see we have some representation from different state reps, and we also have both of our senators, Senator Ron Wyden and Senator Jeff Merkley, as well as Governor Kate Brown. So they've been very vocal on their support. And actually on the next slide, you can see that yesterday when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of DACistas, these are direct quotes from our members of Congress who are making a promise of action to stand in support of DACistas and do whatever it takes to make sure that we're advocating for a pathway to citizenship. Okay, and now I'm gonna talk a little bit more about our educational resource ask. So many of you are educators, many of you work directly with families. So we have a request for support for undocumented students and their families. So our #1 ask is to increase community support and have culturally relevant curriculum and training for educators and staff to address and aid undocumented students in K through post-secondary education. #2, change your school or campus to be a sanctuary or safety. #3, to reallocate the school resource officer program funding to create a task force to develop appropriate trauma-informed and culturally sensitive restorative practices. #4, demand and support local campaigns demanding that city, county, or state officials create sanctuary policies to keep residents safe. #5, join the Home is Here Oregon Coalition for the support and advocacy of Dreamers, TPS recipients, and the immigrant community after a SCOTUS decision. Okay, and now I do want Doctora Luz, if you want to share a little bit about the educational institution resources that we have on here. So the first one that you see is the United We Dream Educational Toolkit, which talks about protecting our community and creating sanctuary campus. So we want to keep our community safe at a time when we expect that immigration agents and many federal government officials and their supporters will try to terrorize, detain, and deport students and their families. So a sanctuary is a place where our vulnerable neighbors can feel safe to live as their full selves. So now I'll turn it over to Doctora Luz.
Thank you very much. One of our goals is to have every school in Oregon become a sanctuary, a safe place for all students and families. Pathway to Scholarships Dreamers program was instituted, first of all, at Beaverton School District many years ago. But currently, we have just instituted at Portland Community College through the Dream Center. It's a program that guides students, partners, community members, and parents into guiding their families and students into obtaining a path to higher education and scholarships, from application writing to requesting letters of support to essay writing. And it's a program that it has been in existence for about 20 years. For dreamers, for immigrants, through a program that started in Miami, Florida. The Oregon Immigration Resources page, of course, you can visit it in different places. One of the resources that the whole state has access to is through the Portland Community College Dreamers Resource Center webpage. You have access to all kinds of guidance and support, from resources, community partners list, to the 24-hour plan, and other resources that these institutions that have been presenting today have provided the community throughout the state.
Great. So here you can see some other resources that we've compiled for you all. So this is not a complete list. Several organizations around the state are actively engaging in an action and plan to support DACA recipients and the undocumented community. So these are some of the few. We've been working very in collaboration with the Oregon DACA Coalition. You can visit their website and find ways to donate. PCC Dreamers Resource Center, and then Dreaming Beyond Borders Resource Center is also a really good website to check out. We also been working very directly with Pacific University Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, holding DACA webinars around mental health resources. We've also been working with SOAR Immigration Legal Services, holding DACA renewals during COVID-19, supporting DACistas in their application and finding community resources. So I would encourage you all to take a look at that. Click on any of the resources. This presentation will be shared with all of you. And then now I'll turn it over to Cindy to wrap up and talk about COVID-19 and the impact on our communities.
Thank you. So as we know, this is a very critical and challenging time. COVID-19 has had an impact on all of us, but especially our immigrant and our undocumented communities and refugees. And so the HEROES Act will help in ensuring that we have those protections for our undocumented communities. And so what we're asking is to continue to expand and provide free COVID-19 testing, treatment, and services for all, regardless of immigration status. Also, cash payment and expanded unemployment insurance must go to all people, including immigrants who pay taxes using their IT number. Automatically extend work permits for DACA recipients and TPS holders to ensure people have stability and the ability to stay safe, and end policies and practices that increase fear among immigrants and prevent them from accessing treatment or services, including the public charge rule and enforcement. Invest more funds in emergency child care relief for families and child care workers. And so we really want to ensure that as a coalition and as a state, we set the moral ground of ensuring that all of our community members are safe and protected as we're trying to navigate this pandemic and survive it. Next slide, please. Okay, so with that, I will go ahead and pass it back to Michael.
Great, thank you, Cindy. So I want to share a few resources that the Oregon Department of Education is putting together. We've been working on developing a toolkit that will be a great resource for our education community across the state. Given that the decision just came down yesterday, we're making some tweaks and edits to this. But if you go to the ODE website, and you search DACAmented or Undocumented Toolkit, you'll be able to find this. And right now it has a few things, but we definitely will be updating it with more. It's toolkits provided to help schools and districts in Oregon create, maintain, and nurture an equitable, inclusive, and welcoming environment for all students and families. The updated toolkit is going to include a number of different sections, including a background on DACA. So folks who need to learn more about what it is, what it's not, who are the DACA recipients, where it's now, and what's the impact of it. It's going to be there. There's going to be an action guide that's going to break it down by different sectors. So it'll have both national resources, it'll have state level resources, and then more specifically, we're breaking it down by educator groups. So if you're educators directly impacted by DACA, maybe some of your students, or you're a school or district leader, or even for professional education institutions and higher education, we'll have some specific resources there that you can use. We'll also provide some communication samples. So if folks want to see some examples of social media posts, press releases, messaging, that'll be there. We'll also provide some best practice considerations for policy and practice. A lot of this is created through the Undocumented Collaborative, and these address issues such as civil rights protections, the Oregon sanctuary law, supporting mixed status families, talking about access to higher education, deconstructing the misunderstandings of trauma, and navigating career pathways. And so a lot of those tools will be there. And then we'll also provide some civil rights, First Amendment, educator classroom guidance, and lesson plans. So again, this website is currently being updated as we're finalizing our edits and getting more resources. And we turn to you all, our friends and colleagues in the communities. If you know of any local resources, please feel free to share them with us. When this website gets updated, I've been calling it the 85% finished, but it'll be a living document that'll get updated. And we'd love to highlight more local resources and organizations that are supporting, DACA folks around our communities that you can help us build to that. Next slide. Next slide. And so within ODE, please feel free to contact us. My colleague, Beth Wiggum, who's moving the slides ahead, will be helping with questions just a minute, is one person. And then you can reach out to myself. We hope, again, if you have any resources to share with us, we'll be happy to put them on our website, and definitely happy to connect you all with other folks involved in this work, especially at Causa and the Home is Here Coalition. So please feel free to reach out to us. At this time in our presentation, we're ready to open it for question and answer. So please put your questions in the question box, and we'll read them off and ask our panelists to respond to them. I do want to point out there's a comment from Jesus Dreamers. So thank you for me. But please send us your questions. Do you have a question? Clear. Doesn't seem like we have any questions. That means our presenters have done an amazing job.
Michael, you're in robot status. Michael, you're in a robot status. You might want to turn on and off your microphone and come back in. If that made any sense.
Thank you, Carmen.
We've got some questions.
Yeah, it looks like we have some questions coming in now. Great, thank you. So one of the first questions is, can you tell me more about the sanctuary program for K-8 schools?
I'll go ahead and take this one. So for sanctuary schools, we want to make sure that all of our students are protected in terms of it, regardless of their immigration status. And so we're really working with school districts. There's various, as a state, we are a sanctuary state. And so we want to make sure that that policy and that's written down, whether it be in their equity policy, but also that it's very vocalized and that there's a plan of action at each college campus and also at each K-12 institution. And so we just also, it goes hand in hand with, how are we accessing law enforcement as an educational system? And what are the ways in which we can continue to reevaluate the ways that our students can be kept safe as we're addressing very important work of undoing institutional racism, of undoing a lot of the things that are embedded in our systematic oppression. And so we've met with various school districts giving this very similar presentation to talk really about the urgency, because there is a lot at stake, especially with the upcoming election. We don't know who's going to take that seat. And so we need to continue to find ways in which we can have protections at state level in our various communities where our students reside to really move towards that bigger goal of having permanent solutions to this immigration crisis. So we're working on having that type of policy statewide. Fatima, I know that you also have information in terms of a map of sanctuary status cities, if you wanted to touch base on that.
Yeah, so Causa has been leading a lot of the work in making sure that all of our counties are passing a sanctuary policy. We are doing a power mapping strategy where we're going directly to some of the most populated school districts, some of the larger school districts, and holding meetings with them. We've realized that some of the more rural counties like Eastern Oregon, such as like Umatilla County, for example, have not implemented sanctuary policies in their school districts. And so we want to, have conversations with them and hold their leaders accountable and make sure that they pass something very similar to like Salem Kaiser School District or other larger school districts.
Great, thank you for those responses. Looks like there's another question that's come in. So Tanya has said that last year they developed processes and clarity for staff regarding FERPA and ICE. She's wondering if anything has changed for the state for needing to alter this.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, so Tanya said that they developed processes and clarity for staff regarding FERPA and ICE. And she says nothing has changed for us to need to alter this. Is that correct?
That's correct. Right now, we are waiting for USCIS, their office, to interpret the Supreme Court ruling on whether or not they'll be accepting, like this is more at the federal level. but nothing has changed.
If there's any other questions from the audience, please go ahead and put those in. Thank you. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any other questions from the audience. Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Beth. Well, if you're like me, sometimes you think of your question later on when you're cooking dinner or walking your dog. So feel free to send us an email and we'll try to answer your question or get to the right person who can help you. So thank you everyone who was able to join us this afternoon. Thank you to our amazing panelists who provided their own knowledge, experiences to share with us today. Thank you to everyone at ODE in support of this work. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
If I may, I would like to plug in support for our Dreamers Resource Centers. We have one at Oregon State University, one at PCC, and one hopefully will be instituted by fall quarter at Portland State University. These centers are very much prepared, willing, and ready to serve any DACista, DACAmented, any immigrant. It's a very safe place. I don't know if Oregon State has the status of sanctuary or PSU, but I'm pretty sure that they're very safe campuses. So for all you educators, please visit our web pages. We have a lot of resources. PCC also raises funds to give DACAs scholarships. And PCC is very committed to every immigrant in this state and this country. So please look us up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And again, thank you to everyone that participated today, that presented today. Have a good afternoon and a good weekend. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.